By late 1941, relations between the United States and Japan had deteriorated significantly. Japanese expansion in East Asia and the Pacific, including the occupation of French Indochina, prompted economic sanctions from the U.S., including restrictions on oil and steel exports. These measures increased pressure on Japan to secure resources elsewhere, particularly in Southeast Asia. In response, Japanese military planners developed Operation Z, a strategy to neutralize the U.S. Pacific Fleet before it could interfere with Japan's planned territorial expansion. Japanese naval records indicate that Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto proposed a surprise aerial attack on Pearl Harbor to prevent American interference in the first stages of Japan's broader offensive. The United States had maintained a Pacific fleet centered at Pearl Harbor, Oahu, Hawaii, including battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and support vessels. By December 1941, the fleet consisted of 8 battleships, 3 aircraft carriers, 7 cruisers, and numerous destroyers and auxiliary vessels. Naval aviation included hundreds of aircraft based at Pearl Harbor and nearby airfields. Tensions were compounded by intelligence reports. U.S. cryptanalysis units had intercepted Japanese communications indicating military movements, but there was no specific warning of a Pearl Harbor attack. Documented official reports show that U.S. commanders expected any Japanese offensive to occur in the Philippines or Southeast Asia rather than at Hawaii. This documentary examines the events leading up to the attack, the execution of the operation, and its immediate consequences. It relies on U.S. Navy action reports, Japanese naval records, official government archives, post-war historical analyses. Interpretations by historians are explicitly identified and separated from documented facts. The narrative focuses on verified numbers, movements, and outcomes, along with documented testimonies from survivors and participants. Emotional experiences, when mentioned, are drawn from official reports, diaries, or post-war interviews. Planning for the Pearl Harbor operation began in early 1941. Japanese naval records document a series of staff conferences in March and April, during which Admiral Yamamoto emphasized the need for a decisive strike against U.S. naval power in the Pacific. Yamamoto's objective was to destroy or disable the Pacific Fleet, thereby providing Japan a free hand in Southeast Asia for at least 6 months. Vice Admiral Chūichi Nagumo was assigned to command the carrier strike force. Records indicate that Nagumo's task force comprised 6 fleet carriers: Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Haryu, Shikaku, and Zuikaku. From these carriers, a total of 353 aircraft would participate in 2 attack waves. The first wave included 183 aircraft, torpedo bombers, dive bombers, horizontal bombers, and fighter escorts. Its target list consisted primarily of battleships and airfields. The second wave, composed of 170 aircraft, focused on additional ships and facilities. Japanese planning documents emphasize operational secrecy, rapid approach, and the element of surprise. Pilots conducted extensive training for torpedo attacks in shallow harbor waters and practiced bombing runs on mock-up ships and facilities constructed on Kyushu. Historian interpretation. Scholars such as John Costello note that Yamamoto understood that the success of the operation depended on absolute surprise and coordination. The extensive preparation and rehearsals documented in Japanese archives support the view that Japan intended to achieve temporary operational superiority in the Pacific. The strike force departed from the Kuril Islands and navigated undetected across the North Pacific. Japanese records show careful navigation to avoid detection by U.S. patrol aircraft. The distance covered by the carriers exceeded 3,800 nautical miles from Japan to Hawaii. The operation was planned with strict timing. Both waves were scheduled to arrive over Pearl Harbor on the morning of the 7th of December, 1941. Japanese records emphasize coordinated takeoff and recovery procedures to maximize aircraft availability for successive strikes. Prior to the attack, U.S. forces at Pearl Harbor maintained standard defensive readiness. Battleships were moored in Battleship Row. Aircraft were dispersed among Ford Island, Kaneo Bay, and other airfields. And radar installations were operational, although staffing was limited. U.S. Naval, Intelligence, and the Army's Signal Intelligence Service had intercepted Japanese communications. However, reports indicate that these were often fragmented and did not explicitly warn of an imminent strike on Hawaii. The U.S. fleet's condition at the time of attack was documented in official Navy reports. Battleships included the USS Arizona, USS Oklahoma, USS West Virginia, USS California, and others. Battleship readiness varied, with some ships undergoing maintenance or refueling. Air assets included PBY Catalina patrol, aircraft, and fighter planes. Primarily Boeing F-4B, 4S, and Curtiss P-40s. Records indicate that at least 188 craft were destroyed or damaged during the attack, significantly reducing air defensive capabilities. Command responsibilities were divided between Rear Admiral Husband Kimmel, commander of the Pacific Fleet, and Lieutenant General Walter Short, commanding the Army's Hawaiian Department. Action reports note that exercises had been conducted simulating air attacks, but these did not anticipate a large-scale carrier-based strike. Witness reports and diaries from personnel describe routine morning activities prior to the attack. Any emotional content comes directly from these documented sources rather than inference. Historians interpret the defensive posture as constrained by both geographical distance from mainland, U.S. support, and underestimation of Japanese capability. Official U.S. post-war analyzes site lapses in aircraft dispersal and anti-aircraft readiness. At 7:48 local time on the 7th of December 1941, the first wave of Japanese aircraft commenced attack on Pearl Harbor. Japanese and U.S. records confirmed that 183 aircraft participated in the opening assault, focusing on battleships and airfields. Airfields targeted included Hickam Field, Wheeler Field, and Kaneo Bay. Torpedo bombers and dive bombers concentrated on moored battleships, while fighters provided escort and strafing support. Official Navy reports document that 21 U.S. ships were damaged or sunk. Notable losses include the complete destruction of USS Arizona and the capsizing of USS Oklahoma. Additional battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and auxiliary vessels sustained varying degrees of damage. A second wave, consisting of 170 aircraft, arrived approximately 1 hour later. This wave targeted remaining vessels and shore facilities. Reports indicate intense bombing of aircraft hangars, fuel depots, and repair shops. Personnel casualties were extensive. U.S. Navy and Army records report 2,403 killed and 1,178 wounded. Documentation shows that personnel on moored ships suffered the highest fatalities. Aircraft losses totaled 188 destroyed. Repair records indicate that some aircraft were rendered operational within weeks, but the overall immediate air combat capability was significantly reduced. Eyewitness accounts documented in post-war interviews describe personnel attempting damage control, firefighting, and rescue operations. Emotional references in these accounts relate to shock, confusion, and efforts to save shipmates, all explicitly noted in the records. Following the attack, U.S. commanders assessed losses and initiated emergency responses. Naval reports indicate that firefighting teams and salvage units worked continuously to contain damage and recover ships where possible. USS Nevada, despite damage, was able to get underway temporarily to prevent blocking the harbor entrance. Several other vessels were refloated or repaired in dry docks in the subsequent months. Damage to airfields limited immediate air operations. Reports from Hickam Field document that of 154 aircraft stationed there, 92 were destroyed and 17 damaged. The attack exposed vulnerabilities in harbor defense and air warning systems. After-action reports highlighted insufficient radar coverage, inadequate aircraft dispersal, and gaps in communication protocols between Navy and Army commands. Post-attack intelligence assessments documented Japanese capabilities, including the use of carrier-based torpedo bombers in shallow water. Lessons drawn from these reports influenced subsequent U.S. naval and air operational planning. Historian interpretation, scholars such as Gordon Prange and Samuel Eliot Morrison note that the attack achieved temporary tactical surprise, but did not target repair facilities, fuel depots extensively, or aircraft carriers, which were absent at Pearl Harbor at the time. These operational choices affected long-term outcomes. The attack prompted immediate political action. On the 8th of December 1941, the United States declared war on Japan, as recorded in the congressional record. President Franklin D. Roosevelt addressed Congress, emphasizing the attack as a deliberate military act. The declaration unified national resolve and mobilized industrial and military resources. Military enlistments increased sharply, and wartime production accelerated. It's documented in War Production Board records. Strategic adjustments followed. U.S. forces prioritized repair and reconstruction of Pacific Fleet assets. Aircraft production was expedited, and carrier operations became a central focus in the Pacific theater. Allied responses included coordination with Britain, the Netherlands, and Australia. Joint planning for counteroffensives in the Pacific commenced in late 1941 and early 1942. Historian interpretation post-war analyses suggest that while Pearl Harbor inflicted significant material and personnel losses, galvanized U.S. military mobilization, and shifted public opinion toward full-scale war participation. Scholars emphasize that Japan underestimated the long-term industrial capacity and political determination of the United States. In the months following the attack, U.S. Navy salvage crews undertook extensive operations to refloat and repair damaged ships. Official reports indicate that battleships USS West Virginia, USS California, and USS Nevada were successfully refloated and returned to service by mid-1942. Port and harbor repair efforts included clearing debris, restoring dock facilities, and re-establishing fuel and ammunition storage. Army engineering units participated alongside Navy construction crews. Aircraft production and pilot training programs expanded rapidly. By the summer of 1942, U.S. carriers had deployed to the Pacific, reflecting a shift in strategic emphasis from battleship-centered operations to carrier-based aviation. Operational after-action reports document changes in naval doctrine, improved radar installation, aircraft dispersal procedures, and anti-aircraft defenses were implemented throughout Pacific bases. Historian interpretation. Scholars note that the post-attack recovery demonstrated the capacity of the U.S. military and industrial system to respond to sudden loss. The preservation of industrial and training infrastructure allowed the Pacific Fleet to project power within months. The attack on Pearl Harbor marked the formal entry of the United States into World War II. It transformed American military planning, leading to the declaration of war not only on Japan but shortly thereafter on Germany and Italy. Documented facts show that the Pacific Fleet, although damaged, retained sufficient operational capacity, particularly in carriers and submarines, to conduct subsequent campaigns. Key carrier units had been deployed to other locations and were not present during the attack, according to fleet logs. The attack accelerated the integration of industrial production with military operations. Shipbuilding, aircraft production, and munitions manufacturing increased dramatically, as documented in War Production Board statistics. Story and interpretation. Analysts argue that Pearl Harbor, while tactically successful for Japan, inadvertently triggered strategic overreach. Japanese planning assumed a delayed U.S. response, but archival records demonstrate rapid mobilization, expansion of naval aviation, and strategic coordination with Allied forces. The experience of Pearl Harbor also influenced operational doctrine. Anti-aircraft defenses, fleet dispersion, and early warning systems were prioritized in all subsequent Pacific operations. The attack on Pearl Harbor on the 7th of December 1941 resulted in the loss of 21 ships, destruction of 188 aircraft, and over 2,400 personnel killed. These facts are documented in U.S. Navy and Army reports. Japanese records confirm the composition and execution of the carrier strike force. Azert, as commanded by Vice Admiral Nagumo under Yamamoto's overall plan. Operation Z achieved temporary tactical surprise, but it did not eliminate the operational capacity of the Pacific Fleet. Aircraft carriers were absent. Repair facilities were not comprehensively destroyed, and the industrial capacity of the United States remained intact. The political outcome was immediate. The United States declared war on Japan on the 8th of December, 1941, initiating full-scale military mobilization. Archival records indicate that enlistment, industrial output, and logistical preparation increased sharply within weeks. Historian interpretation. Scholars emphasize that Pearl Harbor unified American public opinion and accelerated strategic adaptation, ultimately contributing to sustained operations in the Pacific. The attack underscored the vulnerability of forward bases, but also highlighted the resilience of American military and industrial systems. This documentary has presented documented facts from U.S. and Japanese archives, official reports, and post-war analyses. Personal experiences referenced are drawn from diaries, testimonies, and official interviews. The account refrains from speculation or dramatization, focusing on verifiable outcomes and operational details. Pearl Harbor remains a case study in military planning, surprise attack, and rapid strategic adaptation. Its significance lies in the documented sequence of events, the immediate tactical and human consequences, and the long-term effect on U.S. engagement in the Second World War.